It blows me away when I first went to work at Slumberjay. $50 would buy my lunch all week. You know, going to Sonic or Saskatchewan, or it didn't matter, you know. Now, you run in there and it's $50. So we got thumbs up. All right. We're back in Genesis chapter 34. And this is episode 69. And we entitled this episode, The Rape of Dinah. And so we've taught on this extensively because of what happens in this chapter. We're not going to drag it out for 6 or 8 weeks like we did last time. But you can always go back and look at those. But before we get into this chapter, we want to look and see what God says about rape. Now, remember, at the time of Genesis 34, there was no law. The law wasn't given until Moses. And Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, but some of it he wrote, retro before the law was given. But the law will share with you God's perspective on things. I think it's very interesting what the law of God has to say about the crime of rape. It may be interesting to you. So we're in Deuteronomy 22. Verse 22 is the section that God's law handles what happens in the case of a rape. Now, you can go through Deuteronomy and Leviticus and you can find every kind of law imaginable. Like in the case of Sarge, let's say Sarge's bull gets out and goes through his fence and comes over and hurts one of my animals. There's a certain law for that. Let's say his bull gets out, comes over and hurts one of my kids or me or my wife. There's a law for that. Let's say Sarge is trying to get his bull in with his side-by-side and he runs over and kills me. There's a law for that. So this is just a section where God details what to do about a rape. I think it's very interesting. If a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, so the Bible just takes for granted that it's talking about the woman, right? It's not the man's married to a man, okay? So if a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, then they shall both of them die. Both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. So shalt thou put away evil from Israel. Now, hold it right there. This is the verse that you need to fully understand. What happened when they brought to Jesus the woman caught in adultery? This law was what is referenced. And they said, Jesus, doesn't the law say this woman should die? Well, if you look at it closely, it says the man and the woman. And so they didn't bring the man. It was a set-up deal, you know that. And then there's a verse in the Old Testament that talks about that very thing happening. And it says that they would come to the Messiah and he would write their names in the sand from the youngest to the oldest, or the oldest to the youngest, I don't remember. So that was fulfilled in the life of Jesus. And the reason why Jesus didn't say stone her is because Jesus, being God, knew they were setting him up, but they didn't have the man. Now, in today's vernacular, it's known as, it takes 2 to tango. You can't roll out capital punishment on a woman for having adultery with a man, and you don't have the man. And that's why Jesus did what he did. Well, also notice he told the woman, you know, you hear these liberal, pink-haired, you know, rainbow T-shirt wearing whatever, and they'll say, Jesus didn't judge her. Give me a break. Jesus told her, go and sin no more. Now, if she was not born again, she will be judged by God. Now, so God judges sin here, and he judges sin hereafter. But I wanted you to know that verse is what they're referencing to, because the law did say to stone them and kill them. But they didn't have the man. Now, what if we held to that law today? Just in your own world, I bet you know multiple people that you know for a fact, some of them's even proud of it, that they committed adultery. And now adultery is just thrown around. Do you know, used to, adultery was illegal in all 50 states. You say, illegal? Yes, illegal. And now, of course, the last few years, Oklahoma is a no-fault state. You can just get a divorce for any reason. Also, we had a little guy, he used to be the praise and worship leader out here at the Free Will Baptist Church on Highway 75 that later sold to CCCCCCCU Barsville. I was trying to think of his name. Chris, yes, Chris, what was his last name? Esther, yeah, he's a friend of mine. So the other day I put on there that I didn't appreciate, or I did not vote for Donald Trump's pick for the Secretary of the Treasury because he's married to another man and he's openly gay, whatever. And Chris Hester, who I thought was my dear friend, he puts on Facebook, well, people that are married and been divorced and married aren't supposed to be, living, they're living in sin and, shouldn't throw rocks in glass houses. If you live in glass houses, doesn't the Bible say that you shouldn't remarry? No, it does not. And so I wrote back to him and I said, no, it most certainly does not say that. Matter of fact, the Bible gives biblical reason for divorce, adultery, and abandonment, and remarriage. You can divorce and remarry if your spouse committed adultery or abandonment. Apostle Paul says, don't you leave. If you're a Christian married to an unbeliever, don't you leave. But if they leave you, you're no more tied to them. And thirdly, if your spouse dies. See, this is one of the things that got me in trouble at Barnsdall, because I preached a message one time, will a real deacon please stand up? And I said, you Southern Baptists, you won't let a man be a deacon if he's been divorced, even if his wife committed adultery on him and he had every biblical right to divorce. But you will let him be a deacon if he killed her. See, murder doesn't disqualify you in the Southern Baptists from being a deacon. And technically it doesn't. I know you laugh and you think, he's making a joke. No, I'm not. You can kill your wife, go to prison, get out, be a deacon. Nobody asks questions. When the Bible says if you've had sex with somebody, you're married to that person. So I asked the question, how many of you deacons back there just had sex with one woman? Now listen, they'll let an old boy that's been divorced, they'll let him sweep the floor, they'll let him scrub the toilets, they'll let him do every job of a servant deacon, but they won't give him the honor of the position. Why is that? That's because they're devils. Now, I'm not saying they're not born again, but there are a whole bunch of born again devils. Now, watch this. If a man, and I just want to say this about little Mr. Hester. he really shouldn't throw rocks. So if you catch someone under the Jewish law in adultery, is this thing on, Chris Hester? Adultery, the Jewish law said to kill them. Now watch, 23. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed or engaged unto a husband. Now, we understand from the story of Mary and Joseph that a Jewish betrothal or engagement was a binding contract, husband and wife. But they hadn't consummated the marriage yet. So, the example is because the Bible refers to you and I as the bride of Christ. We are engaged to Jesus Christ. We have been betrothed to Jesus Christ, but we have not been married yet, because the marriage supper of the Lamb happens after the rapture of the bride. But we are betrothed or engaged, okay? If a little damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto a husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her. Okay, you got all that? Then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and you shall stone them with stones, that they die. Well, that seems a little harsh, don't it? It goes on to explain it the best it can. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city. And the man, because he humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. What does that mean? What do you think that means? He says, kill them both. Well, kill them both? Well, what if she wasn't a willing partner? Well, it says, because she didn't cry out. Now, the only way I can rectify it is to say, I think what it's trying to say is, she didn't cry out because she was a willing partner. But I don't know firsthand, because I've never been raped. But I've watched it depicted in movies and stuff. And I can imagine that sometimes you might be in such fear that you can't scream. This gets hairier. So it says, because she was in a city and she didn't cry out, which I assume that means she was a willing partner. Okay? Watch this. But if a man find a betrothed or engaged damsel in the field, and the man force her, now they're not in a city. The indication is they're in a field by themselves. And the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lie with her shall die. Go back, if you will, Mrs. Fox. Thank God for Mrs. Fox. To the verse before. Then you shall bring them both out of the gate of the city, and you shall stone them with stones that they die. Go back to the verse before that, if you will, Miss Fox. I'm looking for, does this man force her? If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto a husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her, no forcing yet, verse 24, then you shall bring them both out into the gate of the city, and you shall stone them with stones that they die. Why? The damsel? Because she cried not, being in the city. And the man, because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife, so thou shalt put away evil from among you. I think that's another nail in your argument, or my argument, that she wasn't forced. Okay? There's no mention of her being forced. Okay? And then the next verse says, if a dirty dog finds a woman out in the field by herself, where her cries for help would not be heard, and he forces her. Key word, right? But if a man find an engaged or betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lie with her shall die. But unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death. For as when a man riseth against his neighbor and slayeth him, even so is this matter. So God says that the sin of rape is on the same par as murder. Very interesting. So look at the next verse. For he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her. So she cried out for help. If a man find a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed. Now this is a woman that's not engaged. She's just a virgin woman. And lay hold on her and lie with her, and they be found. Then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he hath humbled her. He may not put her away all his days. Now, notice in verse 28 and in verse 29, there is no mention of forcing her. So this is just talking about, in verse 28, a man that finds a damsel that's a virgin, which is not engaged. And they decide to have sex, but they haven't went through the engagement process and the betrothal and all that. Then he has to marry her. Why? Because he's already married to her. He has to pay her father 50 shekels silver, and he's married to her. And here's another thing. If a man is caught having sex with a woman that's not engaged to and hasn't married, because when he has sex with her, in God's eyes, he's married to her, then in that case, he can't ever divorce her, no matter what. Now, they used to write him a bill of divorcement for any old thing, you know. You wake up with morning breath, get out of here, or, any reason. They didn't really have to have a reason. But if you're in this situation, you couldn't divorce her ever. So God is really concerned with how we treat each other. It's very interesting. God hates what these boys of Jacob's do in this chapter. And he hates it because they kill men by using God's greatest type of salvation. If Jacob's sons would have went into that city and killed those men, or the man that raped their sister, they would have been justified in God's eyes. But it was the way that they killed them. Also, they not only killed the man that lay with her, they killed them all. And God hated it. And mainly because they took innocent life, but they took innocent life using the thing that God invented to show salvation. So they used the circumcision to make them weak and infected, so that they were too sick to even hold their head up or fight back. So they just slaughtered them. But physical circumcision is God's greatest type of spiritual salvation. It's spiritual circumcision is what the Bible calls it. It's the cutting away of the sinful flesh from the born again, born of God's seed, soul, and spirit. It's found in Colossians 2, verses 11 through 15. And I probably teach on it too much, but to me it's the key to everything. In whom also you are circumcised with the circumcision made without hands. So right then, it ain't talking about physical circumcision, because you can't circumcise someone without using your hands. This is a spiritual circumcision. So every other circumcision for thousands of years in the Old Testament was to point you to this circumcision. I've always said, Zig Ziglar is known as one of the greatest salesmen that ever lived. He owned a Cadillac dealership for years. Zig Ziglar. He ain't got nothing on Abraham. So God comes to Abraham. Abraham's like 100 years old. And he's got this whole village of people, servants. He's got 318 men just protecting the rest of them. And God comes to Abraham and says, Abraham, I want to cut a covenant with you. Abraham says, that's cool. He's already cut a covenant with him. He said, but this time, I want you to cut yourself where it hurts the most. And Abraham says, where would that be? He said, I think you know. So Abraham says, are you serious? He's like, yep, that's what I want you to do. Why do you want me to do that? Because it's a sign of the salvation that I've given you for free. Abraham says, okay. Then Abraham goes and puts forth this proposal to all the men in his camp. And the Bible says every one of them does it. That's the greatest salesman that ever lived. Abraham, not Zig Ziglar. So this circumcision is the circumcision made without hands. Well, what does it cut away? Circumcision means the cutting away. It's in the putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ. So this cutting away of your flesh is the circumcision of Christ. Look what it says, verse 12. Buried with him in baptism, wherein ye also risen with him through the faith of the operation. Isn't that something? Operation of God, who hath raised him from the dead. So this spiritual circumcision is the work of God the surgeon, the operation of God. Verse 13. And you being dead in your sins and uncircumcision of your flesh, hath he quickened together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses. Well, your flesh wasn't dead. Your spirit was dead. Your flesh wasn't quickened. Your spirit was quickened inside of your sinful flesh, blotting out the handwriting of ordinance that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross. And having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a show of them, openly triumphing over them in it. So you need to ask yourself, what is the actual way that God can declare us righteous and God can declare us holy? What is the actual way that he can take a sinful person like you or me and give them eternal life? Well, that's because he cuts away your flesh from your soul and spirit. When he quickens your spirit out of his seed to be a child of his, he cuts away your flesh. See, in the Old Testament, when you stole something, that sin was transferred to your spirit. Your body don't go to hell, but your body stole it. It's mine, I stole it. But your body goes back to the ground. But that sin you committed with your body and your flesh, it was transferred to your soul and spirit, because in the Old Testament, before the cross, your soul and spirit was stuck to your flesh. Your spirit was dead inside your soul body, stuck to your flesh. For example, in the Old Testament it says, a soul that teaches that touches any unclean thing is unclean. Well, your soul don't touch anything. Your soul is your spiritual body shape inside your fleshly body. But the soul that touches anything unclean, like a blood of a pig, it was transferred to your soul. But it was your flesh that touched it. When a person committed rape, or a person committed adultery, or a person got drunk, it was their body that did it. But in the Old Testament, your soul and spirit was stuck to your flesh. So it transferred to and condemned your soul. But after the resurrection, the salvation of being born again is when your dead spirit was quickened to life, and the operation of God cut your flesh away from your soul, and you're born of God's seed, new spirit. So now, it doesn't keep you from sinning. How many of you know people that are born again that still commit adultery? Sure. But that adultery is not charged to them. That ordinance was nailed to the cross. You just read it. How many of you people know born again people that still get drunk occasionally? I know some that get drunk every day. But their spirit don't get drunk. And their soul isn't charged with the sin of drunkenness, because their soul has been cut away from their sinful flesh. Does that make sense? So that's how God can say, once you're born again, you're righteous. Because there's a part of you that's quickened from the seed of God that cannot sin if it wanted to. Your spirit? Okay, all right. Before y'all go to sleep, let's go to Genesis chapter 34. What are you going to do with the verse Revelation 21:8? Revelation 21:8 says, all liars go to hell. I used to sing that song to my little boys. I had little boys, and they lied like dogs, just like yours did. And your little beautiful little daughters, they lie. They lie. If you know one thing about kids, they lie. Why do people lie? They lie when they're afraid of getting caught. That's like a kid most of the time. You know, if you're just ugly as a fence post and you ask them, they can't lie. They'll say, no, you're not that pretty. And it hurts your feelings or whatever. But if they've stole a cookie, you know, and they got chocolate chip, you know, running out their mouth, they'll lie because they're afraid of getting caught. So I used to tell my two boys, you know what? I would just love to catch you guys in the truth sometimes. Oh, they lie to you, lie to you. So I used to sing them this little ditty, and it goes like this. Revelation, Revelation 21:8, 21:8. Liars go to hell, liars go to hell. Burn, 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 burn. And that's what the verse says. But what about you? What about me? I'm guessing everybody in here has told a lie since they've been born again. That verse says you're going to hell. Well, not really, because of the circumcision made without hands. A born-again Christian can't lie. Not the part of them that's saved and going to heaven. Now, a born-again Christian cannot be a liar, but they can tell a lie. Does that make sense? And when you tell a lie, it's just as damaging, and it just might hurt people, and it might cause all kinds of pain and stuff, but it ain't charged to your account. Does that make sense? This is the deepest stuff there is in the world. Matter of fact, I taught this to another church in Georgia, and this guy owns this company that sets up the algorithms on Google for all the major companies, and he will not tell them how he does it, and he's a multi-bazillionaire. And they made a video about it on this website that they have, and they asked me if they could use my teaching, and they had a webinar with me for about 3 hours, and I went over and over and over. They said, because you did that for us, we're going to gift you this algorithm. I said, what does that mean? They said the algorithm that we have patented, it takes any company, and when you punch in a search for whatever that company does, it causes their company to come up first. So they put that algorithm on Matoaka Baptist Church, and it's happened over and over and over here. For example, when Hunter Griggs and Tori came to this church, I said, how did you find Matoaka Baptist Church? They said, we just had these kids and we thought we needed to get in church, so we just went on Google and typed up churches in there. It came up Matoaka Baptist first. The other day, a guy calls me. He says, me and my family's looking for a rent house. Do you know any place for rent? Anybody in your church have rent houses? I said, how did you find Matoaka Baptist Church? He said, we just Googled churches and it came up first, Matoaka Baptist Church. Just a gift that they gave us, whatever. So here we are, Genesis 34. We're going to go through this chapter. It's one of the most interesting chapters in the whole book. And I've taught on it so much. It's just, I just love it. But anyway, here it goes. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. There's her first problem. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her, and he lay with her, and he defiled her. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel, and spake kindly unto the damsel. He was the nicest rapist you've ever met. And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, get me this damsel to wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they were come. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved, and they were very wroth, because he had wrought folly in Israel in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. And Hamor communed with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter that he raped. I pray you give him to wife. Hey man, she's already his wife. And make you marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you. And you shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade you therein, and get you possessions therein. And Shechem said unto her father and to her brethren, let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me, I will give. Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as you say. You shall say unto me, but give me the damsel to wife. She's already his wife. And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, his father, deceitfully. And they said, because he hath defiled Dinah, their sister. And they said unto them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. But in this will we consent unto you, if you will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised, then will we give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. that is all a lie. It's deceitful. But if you will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then will we take our daughter and we will be gone. And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. And the young men deferred not to do the thing. They didn't waste any time, because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father. He was the most honorable rapist in Hamor's house. And Hamor and Shechem his son came unto the gate of their city, and communed with the men of their city, saying, These men are peaceable with us. Therefore let them dwell in the land, and trade therein, for the land, behold, it is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only herein will the men consent unto us for to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us be circumcised, as they are circumcised. Shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? In order to talk a grown man into doing this, there must be some profit. And remember, we talked about this morning in our Sunday school class. It ain't money. Money's not evil at all. You know, if you think money's evil, bring all your money up here and lay it on the altar, and we'll, relieve you of the evil. But it's the love of money. That's a different thing. So these guys, because of the opportunity to fleece these guys and make a lot of money, they went through with it. So what? Shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Remember, the verse told you that the rapist Shechem, he was the most honorable person in the Hamor's house. Well, if a rapist is the best of them, what's the worst of them? They're opportunists. And they said, they're not going to dwell with them. They're going to kill them. They said, shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? How is their substance and their cattle be theirs? Well, you got to get rid of them, right? Only let us consent unto them, and they will dwell with us. And unto Hamor and unto Shechem his son hearkened all that went out of the gate of his city, and every male was circumcised. All that went out of the gate of his city. And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword, and came upon the city boldly, and slew all the males. Now, you have to kind of read between the lines there, but I believe that Simeon and Levi carried out the circumcisions. And I believe they had some way of infecting every one of them with some kind of botulism or some kind of contaminant on the knives and the shears that were used to circumcise them. Because I don't care how Billy Jack bad you are, two men ain't going to go kill a whole city full of men. I don't know if you've ever seen two men fight, but two grown men, when they fight, it don't last long, and it's pretty terrible. You've watched too much TV if you think they roll around and punch each other and nobody gets teeth knocked out or hands broken or eyes swell shut. Have you ever seen an eye swell shut in about 2 seconds? I have. I've had my eyes swell shut in about 2 seconds. It's amazing. It's like a miracle. You're standing there and the next thing you can't see. But two men can't go into a city. You can have two Chuck Norrises. And let's say just a handful of regular guys will kill them. So when the Bible says they waited 3 days for them to be so sore that they couldn't fight back, how sore is that? Now, I can imagine having an operation down there, you are sore. But you ain't so sore that you can't fight for your life unless an infection has riddled your body and you can't raise your head up. See, God in the Old Testament, He would destroy great multitudes of men with nothing. Sometimes He'd make them think that they were attacking each other and they'd just kill each other. I heard the testimony of a World War II pilot, and he was talking about the F-16s and the new stuff and all that stuff. He said, hey, that's all great. That's all great and good. But he said, you've got these airplanes now that just a handful of men can fly. He said our airplane is pretty much 15-minute, lesson, and you could get it off the ground. But so he says, you don't have to blow up all these planes. All you have to do is have like a case of malaria wherever you're at. And if all your pilots have malaria and they're sleeping on a malaria cot, everybody know what a malaria cot is? A malaria cot is a cot. That's why you pay me the big money. But it's a cot with the center of it cut out. A malaria cot is a designed cot where, let's just say, your behind hangs through the cot and they just keep pans underneath you and you die on that cot. So it doesn't matter if you're a genius and you can fly an F-35 or, if you have malaria, you can't get your head off the pillow. That's what happened here. And then they just went in and brutally slaughtered them. Now, I want you to stop and think about it. Who is this? It's sons of Jacob. Isn't their names going to be in the new heaven? Sometimes I get it mixed up. Do the 12 tribes, are their names engraved in the foundations or in the gates? Okay, there's a gate that's going to have Simeon on it. Simeon? Levi. Levi, his tribe becomes the high priest. If God can forgive these two jokers, you ain't got no problem. Watch. So they slew all the men, and they slew Hamor and Shechem, his son, with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. What is the nugget in that verse? They never had to let her go home. Peggy said, till death do you part. Gave me the stink eye. Death can come at any moment. And they slew Hamor, and they took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. Look at verse 27. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain, the rest of them, and they spoiled the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep. Well, that's what they were going to do to them, but that don't make it right. Two wrongs don't make it right, does it? Look what they did. They took their sheep and their oxen and their asses and that which was in the city and that which was in the field. Look what else they did. And all their wealth. They took their bank accounts and all their little ones. They stole their kids and their wives. They took them captive as well. And they spoiled even all that was in the house. Are these the godly men of Israel? And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of this land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, and I and my house. If you go back and count it, it's all about I and me and I and I and I. That's all he cares about. 31. And they said, should he deal with our sister as with a harlot? Well, it's a rhetorical question. Of course not. So these people become the Gibeonites. And it's a fantastic story. I've taught on it several times. I'm not going to teach on it again. But if you would like to talk about it, I'd love to talk about it. The Gibeonites is one of the greatest stories in the whole Bible. These Gibeonites, all of them that were left in the city were killed. But there were some that weren't in the city. And so they live on. And they're a tribe of people mixed in with the Nephilim giants in the Promised Land several hundred years later when Joshua goes in. The Gibeonites. Great story. Let's pray. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Another beautiful day here at Matoaka Baptist Church. I know without a doubt that your word doesn't come back void. It goes and it accomplishes exactly what you have it to accomplish. I pray that something said here today, maybe a hug that was given or a kind word to someone, will stick with the people. I pray that they all feel loved and wanted and needed. I just thank you for giving us a place where we can come and the freedom to worship. I ask you to be with us this week as we go about our daily work and our jobs, that we share you with the people that we meet and come in contact with. And to you would all the glory.